So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to the really rather nice domestic terminal here at Terminal 3 of Jakarta Airport. I'm flying today from here down to Bali and I'm flying on Garuda. Now I had a few choices of airlines on this route, some airlines not having the best reputation, Garuda perhaps not having the best reputation, but it's never a bad thing to fly on a nation's flag carrier from its capital city. Plus Garuda is part of the SkyTeam Alliance with whom I have gold status through my ITA Airlines status match. You'll notice that this isn't being recorded in the lounge, so it hasn't gone perfectly, it has to be said. But if you'd like to see what this experience has been like and what the rest of it will be like, and also what the flight back is like, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip. That wasn't the easiest intro to record. Bad experience. Indonesia is a Muslim country and it turns out that the call to prayer is piped into the departures lounge. Not sure whether it's also played in the international part of the terminal, but it certainly is in the domestic part. It's always beautiful to experience the adhan, but it did go on a bit. Anyway, Jakarta Airport is really quite nice. It's an impressive space landside. You can't accuse them of scrimping on the ceiling height here. Are you watching Heathrow Terminal 3? I'd had a choice of at least 9 airlines which fly non-stop between Jakarta and Bali, 8 local low-cost carriers and Garuda. And as I said in the intro, I'd gone with Garuda as it's the national airline and it's the only option between these 2 cities which is in a global alliance. I have SkyTeam Elite Plus status with ITA Airways following a status match last year, so I headed to the domestic business class check-in area. I'd not been able to add my ITA frequent flyer number to my booking online, and when I got to the desk I found out why. Even though Alitalia had morphed into ITA 23 months prior to my date of travel, no one at Garuda had bothered to update their system to recognise that ITA was now a member of SkyTeam and that Alitalia no longer existed. I'd noticed that Alitalia was still an option when trying to preload my frequent flyer number, so had suspected that this would happen. The check-in agent was brilliant and tried valiantly to force the number in, but after some time had to declare defeat. Instead, she created a memo in the booking which printed Sky Priority onto my boarding pass, although I knew the flight wouldn't credit to ITA. Given the time that this had taken, I was happy to just have a boarding pass in hand and to be on my way. And the status was accepted without question at the security point, and I was quickly through. I headed towards the Garuda lounge, and it was a fair old walk, it has to be said. And when I got there, they wouldn't let me in. Not out of any suspicion that my boarding pass may have been tampered with, but because Garuda doesn't allow SkyTeam status holders into the lounge if they're on a domestic-only itinerary. A sign had even been manufactured to explain this. The chap was very apologetic, and it's really not a big deal, but it still was a little bit annoying. I've looked into this since I've been home and I've learned that this is actually standard practice for SkyTeam Airlines, not just a cost-saving measure that Garuda has just made up, which I think makes SkyTeam the odd one out of the 3 global alliances in limiting lounge access when flying domestically on a member airline. As I said, annoying, as I always like to experience an airline's flagship home lounge, but not a real big deal, and I retreated to general circulation to record the intro you've just seen from a seat which turned out to be directly underneath a tannoy speaker. It wasn't a bad spot to watch the planes from either. It's a big terminal, so allow plenty of time to make it to the gate, especially if you end up at one right up the far end of the terminal. I'm a quick walker, but I reckon it still took a good 15 minutes to get to gate 25, even with the assistance of a moving walkway. My SkyTeam Elite status did work for priority boarding, and I was quickly through to our 10-year-old Boeing 737-800, which has been with Garuda since delivery. Through the 12-seat business cabin, I'd had the opportunity to bid for an upgrade into this cabin, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. but I was very happy to stick with the economy cabin for our flight down to Denpasar, which was blocked to take 2 hours, particularly as I'd been able to reserve seat 30A in the exit row without paying anything extra for the privilege, even though my ETA status had not been recognised on the website. And I got cracking legroom, probably just as good if not better than you get in business. You also get your own screen in Garuda's economy, even if the tray table is locked shut. It took me a moment, but it made perfect sense as the legroom was so significant the table just wouldn't have reached you. Instead, you get a table that pops out of the armrest. And of course, as you're in the overwing exit row, you get a cracking view of the engine. Lights and overhead air vents rounded out the seat offering. We pushed back pretty much bang on schedule, and it was quickly time to wave goodbye to the ground crew. The safety video was played on the screen, and it was interesting to note that Garuda doesn't burden its video with unnecessary fripperies, unlike some airlines. And up into the Jakarta afternoon. I was in Jakarta, having flown down from Abu Dhabi via Colombo on SriLankan Airlines, possibly the best tier point run in the world if you're chasing status with British Airways. You can see my experience of these flights in this video. If you make that journey, you'll have to choose between staying in Jakarta, heading promptly back to Abu Dhabi, or heading onwards somewhere else. And Bali really is the obvious onward destination if you've made it as far as Jakarta. I'll make a video about my entire trip in which I'll share what I found in both Jakarta and Bali. The TV did offer a few movies, quite hard to see as the screen wasn't that bright. It wasn't that responsive or that fast either, but at least there was a moving map. Not long after takeoff, the crew came around with a meal. Yes, a seatback TV and a meal. I went for the beef with an orange juice and some mixed nuts. Not the best looking dish ever, but it was really tasty. It was a good flight. It was mostly full, but that legroom was amazing. I spent the rest of the 1 hour and 36 minutes we were in the air volcano spotting out of the window. Indonesia is quite spectacular to fly over on a clear day like this. A quick loop on descent, but we were quickly lined up for our approach into Denpasar. So I talked about Indonesian airlines not having a great reputation. Wikipedia describes Indonesia's aviation sector as the worst in the world, and the reference they cite in support of that assertion quotes Indonesia's own head of civil aviation as saying his country's safety record was woeful, although that article is now 15 years old. Wikipedia does also detail 8 crashes this century, which have resulted in more than 50 fatalities in Indonesia, and lists an overall total of 57 crashes of civilian and military aircraft since the year 2000. To benchmark that number, Wikipedia reckons there's been 6 equivalent incidents in the UK in that time. A few of those incidents involved Garuda, and one in 2007 led to Garuda and all other Indonesian airlines being banned from European airspace for 2 years. But Garuda has been largely crash-free since 2007. They've had a couple of runway overruns in heavy rain since then, although neither of those incidents involved fatalities. And they've been a member of SkyTeam since 2014, which I take as a strong indication that they meet international standards. For the record, Garuda is the only Indonesian airline that does now fly to the EU, but the ban on all other Indonesian airlines was fully lifted in 2018. Some of my YouTube colleagues rejoice in finding and flying on airlines with dodgy safety records, and often find themselves in Indonesia as a result of this ambition. Their video titles write themselves when they do this, and good luck to them. I could have done the same. After all, accidents are exceptionally rare in commercial aviation, even amongst airlines with questionable records. I would have had no qualms whatsoever about travelling with any of the 8 other airlines that service this route. But I decided to give my business to Garuda, even though they were the most expensive option by some distance. Now Virgin Atlantic is in the SkyTeam alliance, redeeming points on Garuda is now an option, so I took this as an opportunity to share what the Garuda experience is like if you find yourselves at this end of the world. Virgin recognises Garuda, but whether Garuda recognises Virgin is a question for another video. Of course, this was a domestic arrival, so there were no formalities on landing, and as I was hand baggage only, I was able to walk straight through the pleasant terminal and was quickly out. WH Smiths really are everywhere. One tip is to download and register the Grab app before you reach Indonesia. It's the local equivalent of Uber. If you follow your nose through a sort of food court area directly outside the domestic terminal, you'll come to another area where a few rideshare companies have set up stands. A rep will even allow you to tether onto their phones to book a car through the app if you don't have your roaming on. Indonesia is actually a tricky place to get a SIM card for various reasons. A Grab is cheaper and a lot less hassle than taking a standard taxi. I'll quickly cover the flight back. I preferred to spend the night in Bali rather than an airport hotel in Jakarta, so I'd booked the first Garuda flight of the day, which left at 7 AM. They didn't actually unlock the doors to the domestic terminal until 5 AM, and there was a somewhat cursory check of reservation or boarding pass before entry. I once again headed to the desks to play the "Can you get my ETA number into the booking game?" Not such a friendly team in Denpasar, but they tried for some time and you will probably not be shocked to learn that they failed.
Morning.
I explained a number of times how they'd added a memo to the booking in Jakarta, but they insisted on ploughing their own furrow here, and I ended up with Sky Priority handwritten on my boarding pass. From my previous career, I could detect some procedural shortcomings in how she'd done this, but once again, I was just happy to get a boarding pass. I wouldn't be getting into a lounge anyway, and I knew the flight wouldn't credit to ETA, so it really wasn't that important anyway. Denpasar's domestic terminal is very pleasant. There is a lounge, but I knew they wouldn't let me in, so I didn't bother to even find it, but I do believe Priority Pass will work. As it was still really early, I was happy to wait for boarding by the gate, which started promptly, and I was quickly on to another 737-800, albeit one that was 13 years old. The same exit row seat and a very similar experience overall. The meal was breakfast. I chose the omelette and it was very tasty and quite substantial. We took off bang on time, even perhaps a minute early, and after 86 minutes in the air we landed into Jakarta 34 minutes early. I paid £197 for these flights, which now I look back on it is quite a lot. You can get flights for perhaps a third of that if you pick one of the low cost options, which isn't actually that easy to do. Only one of the 8 low-cost option features in kayak, and most of them don't feed into ITA Matrix either. You have to go out of your way to book yourself onto one of these other airlines. I mentioned I had the chance to upgrade. It was a very familiar interface, and every airline that has offered me the chance has used this portal. It was, though, a little odd, as the range of prices they'd accept was extremely narrow, between $316 and $347 in both directions. Not a price I was excited by, but had the opening price been perhaps $150, I might well have been tempted to give it a punt. So even with the price I paid, I'm happy to report that I really enjoyed the experience. Garuda was a fun airline, and in that exit row, with food and in-seat entertainment, it was an experience that competes with some European business classes. And at the end of the flight, you're in Bali, which is never a bad thing. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a like. Leave me a comment if you've flown on Garuda. Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly and get access to my exclusive WhatsApp group, I have a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.